Welcome to another of Judgment Day. These are a series of programs that we've been doing over the town, try to keep people informed, spirits up, more knowledgeable about a whole range of things, not just about COVID-19, but about general nature of the society going forward. And I'm really excited today to welcome to this program Sisonke Msimang, who wrote a book not that long ago called Always Another Country. And since we've all got time to read books, I can strongly recommend that you perhaps can get it online if you can't get it by a bookstore. I don't know if the regulations are allowing that yet. She also happens to spend a lot of time in Australia and stand at the Centre for Stories. So welcome very much. And I know you said to me, since you're in Australia at the moment, and it's night time there, that COVID-19 is not an issue that you can speak to directly. And that's fine with me, because what I wanted to talk to you about the stuff that you've written about for a long time, which is kind of the intersection between race, gender, and democracy. And the one thing about COVID-19, and I'd love your comment on it, it seems to me that certainly from looking at it from South Africa's point of view, those kind of components that have given you great anxiety and should give us all great anxiety have been highlighted by COVID-19. In other words, people who are poor get a much lousier ride than people who are wealthy. There's a lot of agenda violence at the moment going on. Even the president, perhaps it's unfair to say, even the president, particularly the president, given he has raised that commendably so. So I'm just curious to your sense of this. What is, just even from a, what do you think is going on here? And how do we get out of this?
Thanks so much. It's fantastic to have a chat with you and to be talking to fellow South Africans. That phrase has come to mean something a bit scary for everyone when they hear my fellow South Africans. It means another phase of lockdown is about to be introduced.
Well, it's my first intercontinental talk.
Look, I think that like many people, as soon as I began to see what was happening with COVID in many parts of the world, I was immediately most anxious for South Africa. I knew that if it was bad in places like Italy and the UK, then clearly it was going to be very bad for us. And so that concerned me greatly. And my anxieties were obviously around what it means in a society that is both poor, but as we all know, continues to be a place the deep leg of apartheid still abound. So not just poor, but unequal, which means unequal access to transportation, unequal access to the kind of resources that help you get, PPEs, all of the things that help you to fight getting coronavirus are the things that, poor people in South Africa have the least. So I was, obviously kind of at gut level, obviously very concerned about what that would mean. But from a governance perspective, I was especially worried because, in the last few years, the ANC has just proved so incapable of mustering any real ability to govern the country properly. So I was really worried about what that would mean in a crisis context. And obviously, initially, I think the ANC really did rise to the occasion. I think the president and I think the ruling party and government really did a fantastic job of assessing and understanding the kind of flaws in our society and understanding what it would take and understanding that you needed a complete lockdown, not just because, of the public health issues that are concerned, but because you wanted to send a message that we are one society, right? So I think a lot of what has felt especially onerous to middle-class South Africans, to people who live in neighborhoods like the one that I used to live in, has felt especially onerous to middle-class South Africans has been this idea that you don't need to lock us up, so much. Why can we only go and run at between, 6 and 9? That doesn't make any sense. And of course, it makes total sense if you think about everyone in the society. And because we are no longer a society where you can govern by two sets of rules, it had to be felt particularly harsh by one segment of the population. So initially, I think my response to what the South African government was like, wow, guys, you're actually nailing it and you're listening to science. that's changed, but
What changed? What changed your? Because there's this initial, and I have there's a but. What's the but? And
so
it's interesting. Somebody from afar perhaps has a better and more dispassionate analysis than those of us. Let me just say immediately, I agree with you about middle class views. I mean, that really kind of this idea that people moan about the 6 to 9, as if that's the biggest problem. Or my friends say we can't walk on the mountain, and I think, why are you so tone deaf?
Yeah, it's a real tone deafness. Yeah.
But
Also,
there's a but answer, and I'm interested in what you. Yeah, please carry on.
So initially, and I was fully and remain fully supportive of the ban on alcohol. I think that makes complete sense from a public health perspective. I used to work many years. I worked in public health. I worked on HIV. So a very different epidemic, but nonetheless, there's a certain sense that you have of what public health measures are important. We know the effect alcohol has not just on people's behavior in terms of exacerbating domestic violence and gender-based violence, but also more importantly on freeing up ICU beds, on freeing up emergency rooms, and making sure that hospital staff are available when you think you've got an impending, epidemic on your hands. So for me, alcohol made sense. A very restrictive lockdown, given the apartheid spatial location, geographic location where Black people continue to live, to service dominantly white, but also Black middle class, population. All of that made sense. And then I also thought that it was fantastic to get public health experts sort of explaining to the country, because if we are going to give up some of our rights voluntarily and say this is an exceptional circumstance, these are public health measures, then I think the onus is on the state and on politicians to then take extra care in terms of the accountability, an immediate level of accountability, right? So there you're not relying on the sort of classic democratic tools of accountability, which are about elections. We don't have that, too long in advance. So what you need is a daily level of accountability. You do this, we do that. You do this, we do that. So you lock down, we'll tell you how we're doing in terms of preparations with PPEs, freeing up hospital beds, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought that was all great. And then, of course, but around what then happened with the over-militarization of the response. So quite quickly we see, army and police who are on the streets in a punitive way, rather than a way that helps safeguard health. So part of what happened in the last few weeks is there has been a sense in which governance has been used to punish people, to regulate people, and not to use the opportunity to think, what does an army look like as helping people? What does people's army look like? It's an army that is saying, okay, you need to get off because that's lockdown regulation. Here's a mask. And how do we help to guide you to understand where you're supposed to go? So an informative role, and one that, of course, demonstrates there's a bit of muscle behind that information. So we didn't have that. So that was the first kind of red flag for me. And then I began to worry because, unfortunately, the culture of apartheid is something that has not left us. We see this in so many ways, across our society. And it's helpful at this time to think about the culture of apartheid because it helps us think beyond the frame of race. Yeah? So we have a cabinet that reflects what the general population is like, and yet the mindset is one of over-regulation, over-policing, an overly punitive state, which then says, this is not just what we guide you to do in terms of movement, because COVID is about movement. It's about diminishing our risk. It also then says what you will wear, what buy in the shops. If that's not overreach, I actually don't know what represents. So for me, the but has come in on the overregulation, the punitiveness of the response, and in some ways the loss of sight of why we are doing this, which seems to be we're doing this for public health, not simply to flex the muscle and the authority of the state. And that's what worries me now.
So let's just probe that I mean, there are a whole range of things that you've put on the table, and I'd like to just deal with them by one. I'll come back to the spatial geography in a moment. But what is it that you think when you say, and rightly, that the apartheid mentality has not left us? I mean, after 26 years, what is it about a police force, or what is it about security people that don't look back, many of whom I might add, if they had memories, had been terribly badly treated? I mean, that's not even the right word. I mean, appallingly treated.
Yeah.
Many murdered by the security police at the time. What is it about the situation that a cabinet looks like our people, the sense is elected by the majority of our people, and that somehow on their watch, the police seem to act in a very kind of impressive representation of what the old apartheid police were like? I don't understand that, and it troubles me. Are you saying this is part of an endemic culture, almost the kind of Fanonian idea that, in fact, when you move from one society to another, in fact, people assimilated that kind of colonial culture, they start reproducing it themselves? I mean, is that what's happening?
I think yes and no. So in part, when we talk about it as assimilation, it puts the onus of belief system on the individuals who inhabit it. And I think that if you asked any of them, they would say, of course not, that's not who we are, and of course that's not.
Yes, I think that's right. Yes.
We understood how it behaved, we bore the brunt of it, et cetera, et cetera. And it's important to also recognize that what I am not saying, I'm not saying that is worse than apartheid, that what the government is doing is oppressing us. So I'm not in that territory, because I think that's the wrong move and that's the wrong analysis. What I am saying is that the logic of the state remains consistent across time in South Africa. And that part of what it means to try, the language that we used in the 1990s, and sadly I'm old enough now to remember this language, because we deliberately chose the language of transforming the state. What's clear that we haven't transformed the state. What we've done is inhabit it. So the individuals are capable of an analysis that says, no, what we're doing is cracking down hard because people won't listen, right? That's what I think, Minister, I think any of them would say, what you have to do is crack down hard on people so that they understand that the law is the law. I think that's what they would say. But what the institutions of the state, how they operate, is to say, this is how we've always treated people. This is what it means to be in relation to people. It's punitive, it is harsh, and it doesn't have any space for creativity. So we saw this with Marikana, right? We know that the default setting for these institutions is to come down incredibly hard without any level of nuance and without any understanding that you have other options. And in order to counter that, what we've done, so COVID makes us want to play catch up, right? So in order to counter that kind of response from a state, there's a lot of other efforts that should have been happening a long time ago, and those haven't been done. And the first of those is to begin to build a human rights culture within those institutions and within the state in general. And that doesn't exist. So it's less about the individuals who inhabit this, but it's about the state itself, that bureaucracy and how the bureaucracy operates.
So yeah, I mean, I think you're quite right. I mean, to suggest that we do not live in an immeasurably better state than we had under apartheid would be only the FW de Klerk not believe that. I mean, you can't possibly believe that if you're a sentient, rational person. It does, but in a way, in a sense, apartheid set the bar higher rather than a strange way, because if you're oppressed, you should, in a sense, remember your oppression and use it as the to actually ensure that this never happens again. In fact, Mr. Mandela said that in his inaugural speech back in the day. And I suppose the question I've got for you then is, how do we change that?
Yeah. So let me just...
You to reconfigure that.
Yeah. Look, I think that notion of once you've been oppressed, it should set the bar higher. It's such an important idea, because I think all too often, and I'm very guilty of this myself, so I say this as a self-critique as well as a more general critique. I think very often what you hear these days is this idea that what we should do is lower the bar. If they did it, so should we, right? If white people are racist, why can't we be racist back? If the apartheid government was corrupt, why can't we too also be corrupt, right? So, and this is precisely the opposite, I think, of what so many people who fought for South Africa's freedom believed. The ethos was always that we were setting the bar higher than what that immoral state was doing, that we existed as a force that would counter that kind of terrible thinking, those kind of terrible practices. So something happened that has allowed us to think that a race to the bottom rather than the kind of pride of being better than that as a society is somehow okay.
So I think, like, rephrasing the question in a way, I suppose what I'm saying is, just listening to you, is you're right. We don't want to, we have raised the bar, and therefore we can be more, I mean, if the apartheid government acted like this government did, they would have been actually quite reasonable in Australia. Yeah. No bar for them. Nothing was beyond their authoritarian reach, racist reach. This government, no one's suggesting they like that, but I agree. The point is, we're judging them by an entirely different standard. And I suppose the real question is, what is it that we need to do now to ensure that that standard is complied with?
Yeah.
What are we doing wrong? I mean, 6 years later, it seems to me, going to come out of COVID-19, I want to ensure, and I'm sure you too, that we to live in a society which is more democratic, more equal, more just than it was before we went in. So the question is, how do we do that? Not a terribly difficult question, but just.
So the problem is that the answer is too long.
Okay, I can't say I've got too much time, but give me a short version.
So the short version is, how you do that is to have a state and politicians who are worthy of the electorate. So if we look at America, we look at Trump. I think what we have seen is that you have a leader who is in some ways reflective of the population, right? That they put it closely contested, but that they are enough people who believe in what he's doing, that there is something he represents something, right? And I think that if you look at South Africa, maybe I'm too optimistic, maybe I'm naive, but I don't think that we have a situation in which the conduct of the ruling party and of our politicians in general is reflective and representative of people's best aspirations and of what they really want, in spite of the fact that people vote for the ANC. And I think that the reason why so many people vote for the ANC is because they are the best of a really bad lot. So I think that there is a failure within our political system because choices are paltry. And part of the reason that choices are paltry is because of our history, because we still haven't gotten over that question of racial suspicion. Because we still, and obviously rightly so anyways, the conversation we just had about sort of middle-class tone deafness that is embodied by middle-class people of all races, but is certainly embodied by middle-class white people very, very much, right? So you don't have a lot of great choices. And I think there continues to be a strong historical legacy which says that people will vote for the ANC. And Black people will tell you very clearly and firmly that they're not happy with the ANC, but that they will continue to vote for them. And that's not an illogical perspective. That's not an illogical conclusion to reach, but it does lead us to this place where we are stuck. The second part of that long answer is that we also have a level of impunity that the ANC is allowed to exercise. Because in our founding moments, we have this agreement around amnesty, forgiveness, et cetera, which doesn't translate into when people are offered amnesty, and then we don't get to the bottom of what actually happened in the vast majority of cases. Instead of then saying, hey guys, listen, what we're trying to do is create a society where there is no bitterness. And so we extended this offer, which says, NP guys, tell us what happened. Tell us the truth. And then the NP guys say, oh, I don't remember. I don't know. I'm not sure. Wasn't there. All the things they said. Surely after that happens, then the government can then move forward and say, okay, we didn't play by the rules, so we're going to investigate. And we will, use this is a country now where rule of law matters and where accountability does matter. And I think that if in that founding moment that we don't extend forgiveness and we don't extend the offer, but then when that offer is met with the kind of arrogance and refusal to operate that we saw, then there have to be consequences for that. Because if you don't, then you will forever more be beholden to that moment where you let people walk away. And then we get into the point, and I will be the first one to say, I find it hard, even given the $1 trillion that clearly we can pin on that Zuma was put in charge of our country for far too long by a hollowed out ANC. Even that Zuma president, I find it hard to imagine that he would serve prison time when we let so many perpetrators of egregious human rights go without actually giving it a proper opportunity to prosecute. So we've created this setup for ourselves.
What do we do with people like Zuma then now?
I don't know. So again, I don't know. This is a genuine conundrum for me. I don't say this churlishly. I'm not trying to be radical. I honestly think this is a trap, and it's a trap that will continue to really hound us for a long time if we don't deal with it. So when you ask, what do we do? How do we get a government that's more accountable? Because we need it. Because we will become poorer and poorer and make worse and worse cases if we don't have an accountable government. So I'm not in any way arguing we shouldn't have accountability. But this double thing, we will always be beholden to the what about.
Are you saying, out of still going back and addressing that, the kind of dream which I suppose Martin Luther King had, which is to say you want a society where it's the character of the human being rather than the color of the human being that matters, is always going to be problematic until we address the character of all human beings. I could have put it that way, which would include that which has got us into this in the first place through apartheid.
It's absolutely, I couldn't have put it better. It's a wound that remains open, and it's a wound that festers the further away we move from it rather than heals. So 25 years later, I think it speaks to the fact that we also we've had a lack of leadership, not just in the ways that we talk about every day and we see in the newspaper, but a lack of leadership in terms of helping to develop a new intellectual narrative where we are today. Right? So what a generation ago were so capable of doing was to frame our issues for us. So what is the TRC if not a frame for understanding our moment and helping us to think what we need to do now is transition without bitterness? That's a frame. That's a wonderful narrative. Okay? So 25 years later, that narrative is old, and yet we continue to use it. And it's also a narrative that didn't work out fully, right? So what's the new language to help us think about that? And so in the absence of that new language, what you then get is a person like me saying, oh, guys, I can't let Zuma go. So if we had a smarter person maybe than myself who would then be able to say, this is what's happened. This is why we have to draw a line in the sand. This is why you must punish Zuma. Otherwise, it would be an endless cycle, right? Someone with the gravitas and the now and the political reach to begin to carry that message forward and to get national conversation going, because it is a thing which we need a national conversation. We need it.
But then we
Right?
should all be having it. The kind of, as you were talking, I thought the kind of conversation we're having, I'd like to bottle up and ensure that everybody is, in other words, the whole society, because that's what we've got to have. Somehow we're not being able to have that.
That's right.
I'm running out of time, but I want to ask you two final questions. Is that the reason why you mentioned earlier the spatial geography of South Africa? It's a big thing of mine now because it's been for a long time. But why this is particularly pertinent now is COVID has highlighted this. You can't have a lockdown effectively.
No.
We put a whole lot of people in a cheap barrel. They happen to be black, they happen to be poor. Well, it's fine, middle class areas. For me, I can have a lockdown, I'll survive. You can't have it on the road. And the question is, why is it that we've taken 26 years and so little has happened to change the spatial geography of our urban areas?
It's the same reason why.
Is it the same reason?
It's the same reason why we have taken so long to fix education. It's the same reason why, because there's no cost, no accountability, because the ANC is a legacy organization, exists with absolutely no moral or center anymore. It's thoroughly useless as far as I'm concerned. And I have no sentimentality about the ANC, but it continues to exist as the only player because of its legacy. Only show in town. And in that sense, it can do whatever it wants. And it will continue to occupy power. So why does it need to? Why would we need to address spatial legacy? Why would we need to address having a proper public health system? Why would we need to educate Black children so that they can have all the hopes and the dreams and realize all of the dreams of which they are capable? Why would they need to do that? Because they don't have to. They're still going to be there.
The only answer to that is because the majority, strangely enough, want to live in that kind of society. But somehow the politics are failing us to do that.
We do, but unfortunately, we have a leadership which we don't deserve. And I don't think the ANC are worse people than any other kind of leaders. I think this is what it means to occupy power and not challenge that power. Lack of competition and political. You and me. Judge, we would be exactly the same if we were there forever. People would be howling and trying to get you and me out of there. It'd be nice for the first 3 years, and then they'd be like, why are those still having this conversation, right? So it's the nature of power. That's it.
Well, you're right. By the way, I agree with you about question of leadership. I'd rather have what we've got at the moment by a million miles, Boris Johnson or Donald Trump. I'm very lucky in that sense. But can I ask the final question? I know this admits of a longer answer, and I'm sorry that it's taken me so long to get there, but there have been clearly significant evidence of gender violence, greater gender violence. Why is that? Is that just because of the tensions of that this is a hotbed that's created by COVID? What is going on in your view in that regard?
Yeah, I think, what we see is that COVID exacerbates already existing inequalities in any society. So this is South Africa as well as Australia, as well as Germany, France, etc. So you have that. And then, of course, because gender-based violence is because it's such a complex thing that involves both, physical violence, but also what we call coercive control. So what happens is that many women are living in situations in which they're monitored very closely, and the monitoring and the behaviors that women have in response to the monitoring, what then is a dance. It ultimately leads to the physical altercations. And so what COVID means is that people are pressed like this, and those coercive control measures that are always in place, always happening, women have less leeway to be able to avoid that, right? The constant checking of the phone, the constant monitoring of where are you doing, who are you speaking to, that stuff is amplified in this thing. And of course, then the blow-ups are even worse. So that's what's happening, yeah.
Look, thank you very much. I mean, we could have carried on for another hour, and I kind of feel this is the kind of conversation, as you indicated earlier, we should be having across the board. It's the kind of conversation we should be having now, because as we come out of COVID-19, maybe, the classical cliche about we should never let a crisis go to waste This is one where perhaps we've got an opportunity to reboot afterwards. Sisonke Msimang, thank you so much. And for those who are interested in this, may I again recommend they read Always Another Country, that they quiet and about what is contained there. Is a fabulous book. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Judge.